Hi, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Thanks for joining us today for our presentation with Michael Gossman, Modality Manager of Althea. Michael will provide an overview of and insight of preventive maintenance procedures and how to properly execute them. A few announcements before we get started. We'd love for you to join us for continuing education, networking, and vendor engagement opportunities at our HTM Mixer coming up on September 9th and 10th in Kansas City. Please visit htmmixer.com for details, registration, and details on how we're making sure your meeting environment is safe and clean. While you're there, make sure to sign up for our newsletter so you always have the most up-to-date information. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Althea. Althea brings an established global presence to the market space, managing more than 1.4 million medical devices in over 2,700 healthcare facilities across 17 countries. At Althea, they are more than a diagnostic imaging organization. They are an all-encompassing engineering company with more than 150 years of combined experience across diverse modalities and manufacturers. Their organization is built on 4 core service offerings: a world-class medical parts program, capital sales and installation program, technical support services, depot repair service, and a 5-star training program. For more information, please visit althea-group.com. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday t-shirt by answering the following question. In what city and state is Althea's U.S. headquarters located? Please use the questions feature on the GoToWebinar dashboard to submit your answer. As always, today's webinar is eligible for 1 continuing education credit from the ACI. You can obtain your certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We'll wrap up today's presentation with if you would like, you could submit questions to our presenter anytime during the webinar using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. We'll get through as many attendee questions as we are able. As I mentioned earlier, our speaker is Michael Gossman of Althea. Let's get started.
Hello everyone, welcome to another Webinar Wednesday. My name is Michael Gossman. I'm with Althea US. I am the instructor and modality manager for Injectors at Althea US. And today we are going to talk about what is preventive maintenance and the steps for procedures for the contrast injector. So what is preventive maintenance? Well, changing your oil in your car is preventive maintenance. And most of the time when you change the oil in your car, you also change your oil filter. Again, preventive maintenance. And then you do some checks like your air filter and other things that you may do. Well, the same is for any medical equipment. Preventive maintenance limits or tries or helps limit service calls and downtime you may have with that equipment. Proper PM procedures for contrast injectors are important. Now I'm going to go over the basic PM procedures and cover what every injector should, every procedure should entail. So what is preventive maintenance? What is the common definition? We hear that all the time. I have to go do PMs. I have 10 more PMs to get done by the end of the month. We all hear that from our managers, and the managers are all looking at their numbers saying, why do we still have 27 PMs open when there's only 10 days left to go in the month? Well, that's fine, but quality runs the show. And a good PM procedure on an injector will limit the service calls you will have for the next year. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to do PM, a proper PM on injectors, is downtime. When the injector's down, so is the modality. When the modality is down, the hospital is not creating revenue. CT, MR, cath lab, interventional, everywhere you're going to find an injector. Those are major revenue generators for the hospital. Now they do break, they do go down, but with proper PM procedures and techniques, you will limit the time that they are down or the time that they break down. Each modality, CT, MR, vascular, angio, they have one injector per room. They don't have multiple injectors. So when one goes down, it's important it gets brought up right away. And then everything continues as normal, we hope. There's no spare. Downtime of an injector affects many areas. Not only the modalities down, but any patients that have had procedures scheduled will have to be postponed. Scheduling nightmare. When is the injector going to be back up? When can I use it? How much longer? When are the parts going to get here? These are all questions of having a down injector that you'll be asked by the director. So good PM procedures will limit the times that you have to answer those questions. How long does it take to do a PM? Well, there's several factors that include in that. The biggest one is how dirty that injector is. Typically, on a typical injector, it's about 2 hours long from start to finish. If you have a contrast soaked injector, it's going to take you longer. But typically I schedule 2 hours to do the PM, and I usually give it back to them. So that's some basic information right there, is PMs are important, and it takes about 2 hours to do each injector. So when you're scheduling, keep that in mind. Prior to doing the PM on the injector, you're going to want to think about your preventive maintenance or PM kit, as we all hear it, as we all know it by. So what is a PM kit for these injectors? Basically, it's gaskets that you will have to replace as you do the PM. Once contrasts get on the injector, on the gaskets, those gaskets need to be replaced. The gaskets will harden from the contrast, and when it hardens from the contrast, it's no longer doing the job. It's no longer keeping additional contrast out of the injector. Contrast is the #1 issues causing problems with the injector. Contrast intrusion. We see it all the time. #1 problem. So PM kits. What's in a PM kit? We mentioned it was gaskets. So let's take a look at the kit that Althea provides for the PM, for the Stellant. We have the dual overlay assembly gasket, very common. Usually has to be replaced almost every PM. Very seldom do I see one that doesn't have to be replaced. Front casting gasket. This normally has to be replaced. Just by taking the covers on and off, you'll damage the gasket. That's included in the kit. Front cover seal, if it's even there. If it's not there, you have one in the kit. But you take it apart, you take the gasket out, clean it, inspect it, replace as needed. LED gasket, this is another one that gets contrast intrusion and usually should be replaced every PM. Lens cap, it's not, usually this can be cleaned and replaced, but if it breaks, you have the replacement. Knuckle gasket, another important gasket. It keeps the contrast out by the knuckle assembly. cap seals, keeps contrast out of the top end, or tries to, and plunger boot tips, which is right here. That is actually a gasket around the top of it. Now, wherever you buy your PM kits from, verify that they meet OEM specifications. When I started this several years ago, I was amazed to find out that most of these gaskets are EMI gaskets. That means that they have a carbon filler in them. And that carbon filler in the rubber gasket or the rubber material actually keeps magnetic interference out of the injector, and what's in the injector stays in the injector, and it doesn't affect the modality. I have seen some other products out there that are not EMI, but they're being passed as OEM quality, and they're not. So wherever you buy your gaskets from, verify that they meet OEM specifications and they have the EMI material in them. With that carbon filler in there, these gaskets, especially the top end, the front casting one, they are more brittle than standard rubber. So when you stretch it, they will break a lot easier because they're not a solid rubber. They have carbon filler in there. So you want to be careful when you put them on, and that's why when you take them off or try to clean them, they do fall apart. So that's the third party, or Althea's PM kit. You have all the gaskets that you need that need to be replaced in a Stellant injector. The other PM kits that we offer give you the same value, the gaskets that you need in that injector. Let's look at the OEM's PM kit for the Stellant. This is the dual overlay assembly. This is exactly how I received it when I ordered it. You get two knobs. You get two optic sensor covers. And I'll be honest with you, I've never replaced one of these in 15 years. They're plastic, they clean up real well. The only time they would have to be replaced is if they're scratched. Two gaskets for the covers. And two front cap seals. That's it. That's all the gaskets you receive. But they do charge you for a contrast warmer. That's $1,400. Now, I'm not saying a contrast warmer isn't important, but should it be replaced every PM? Not necessarily. It should be replaced when it's broken. So the OEM PM kit runs about $1,700. Althea's PM kit for the Stellant is $370. So the choice is yours. Do you want the gaskets that you need for $370, or pay, 5 times that much for very limited gaskets, but you do get that heater, the heat maintainer. All of Althea kits provide you with the gaskets that you need for the specific injector that you're working on. Do you have to replace every gasket? Well, you're in there. You have to take the covers apart. So why wouldn't you replace the gaskets? Does it take extra time? Minimal amount of time. Don't be lazy and say, well, I'll just get it next time. Just remember, with contrast on the gaskets are no longer good. Would you reuse your oil filter? Probably not, because oil filters are relatively inexpensive, $10, $15 to protect your engine, your $40,000, $45,000 car. Think of that when you go to the injectors also. I'm not trying to push PM kits, but you have to take it apart So you might as well replace the gaskets while you're in there. It's a small cost to keep your injector up and running. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's why it's called preventive maintenance. It's a PM. You're going in there and you're looking for possible issues with this injector. And this goes for every injector out there. We service all the injectors here at Althea. We service all the Bayer, all the Assist, and all the Librefloorshine, Covidian, Grebe. We see them all, and we have kits for just about all of them. So these procedures I'm going to be talking about next covers every injector out there. Preventive maintenance steps. You're going to talk to the customer. You're going to record the original protocol on the screen. You're going to do an initial inspection, a test injection, cleaning, 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 and cleaning. Do a calibration verification, final operations check, and then put the original protocol back on the injector. Those are just a few of the steps, general steps that you're going to have to perform on any injector you work on. That's just the way it operates. Is all the PM pretty much the same on all the injectors? Yes, it is. Is PM procedures basically the same on all X-ray equipment? Yes, it is. Is PM procedures the same on all infusion pumps? Yes, it is. Doesn't matter what manufacturer you're working on. You still have set things that you have to do, like on X-ray equipment. You got linearity, accuracy. You have those things that you have to verify. Infusion pumps, you have flow rate, so on and so forth, occlusion, pressure, whatever it is. They all apply to every injector, every infusion pump out there, and also with injectors. These steps apply to all of them out there. Same thing, same thing. So let's start with the first one. First step, talk with the customer. Why should you talk with the customer? Why is it important to talk to the customer? Well, the customer works with this injector every single day. It knows what its nuances is. It knows what the problems are. They know when things don't go quite right. And that's where you talk to the customer. So, Mary Jane, how's everything going today? Your injector's due for a PM. Oh, yeah, I noticed that. It's due this month, right? Yes, it is. How's it operating? It's been working great. Okay, so no issues with it? Nope, none whatsoever. Okay, can I take a quick look at it? Sure, go ahead. So you go in and you take a look at that injector to see how dirty it is. And then you can judge your time, how much time you're going to need to do the PM. Because cleaning is going to take up 75 to 80% of your time. That's just the way it is. Now, the OEM may not feel that way, but I'll tell you what, I like a clean injector. Like, cars run better when they clean, right? That's why you wash them all the time. Well, injectors will run better when they're clean. So you talk to Mary Jane, you find out, okay, I'm going to need 2 hours to do the PM. When's a good time to do it? Well, I have a full schedule. I can't really block the schedule off, but I leave at 6. So maybe after hours is going to be the best time to do that injector. Maybe early morning, maybe in the middle of the night. All my cath labs, I would go in at 7 o'clock at night and work till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They would have one emergency cath lab going, and I could have free reign of the other 4 or 5 or 2 or whatever they had. I did that up at North Carolina, University of North Carolina. I went in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was finishing up at 5 o'clock in the morning, just as they were coming in to set up for the next case. But I did 6 injectors that night. It was a long night, but I wasn't interrupted, and I was able to do a very good job with those injectors. And that's the important thing, doing a good job for the injectors. Talk with the customer, set up the time that's convenient for both them and you, and work with your manager to accomplish the scheduling. So talk with the customer, find out if there's anything, any issues with it. If there are issues, you want to correct the issues first before starting the PM. What is the sense of doing a PM and saying, oh yeah, well I know this doesn't work right, so I'm not going to check it. No, that's not the way it works. If this is wrong, fix it. And then you can do the PM after you fix it. There is no sense of doing a PM on a broken piece of equipment. Well, they're getting by without it, that's no problem. No, fix it. Because there may be other problems that one problem is hiding. It may go deeper than just that one problem. So fix the injector. Resolve the issues first before beginning the PM. And that's why you contact your customers at the beginning of the month when you know your PM's coming due, so that you have a chance, a time to correct the problems. Even if they're intermittent problems, those are the worst, but approach them and repair that injector. Maybe it needs to be sent out for depot repair, like sending it to us, because you're having intermittent 311 errors. I'm sure anyone that worked on a bare injector know what a 311 is. It's called a headache. Well, we can repair that 311 here in Althea depot level and provide you with a loaner. And we can even accomplish the PM for you here if you want us to. That's not a problem. One done shop. It's no big deal. That's what we're here for. We're here for the customer. So resolve the issues. Okay, so you've gone in, you've inspected the system. It's going to take you 2 hours to do the PM, and now it's time to do the PM. Record the protocol on the screen. Record that protocol. It's so important to put it back the way you found it. Don't leave a test protocol on the screen. They may inadvertently use it on a patient, and that's not good for anybody, particularly the patient. So always record the original protocol on the screen. Once you do that, then you want to go ahead and do an initial inspection. With that inspection, you want to take a once look over it to see if there's anything that could be dangerous to you, such as like on this one. Bad cable. It wasn't there when you first looked at it, but now there's a cut in that cable. So are you going to do the PM, or are you going to order the head cable? Well, I would order the head cable and postpone the PM, because that could be a problem. I would actually deadline this and say, Mary Jane, you can't use this. This is an issue. This is a safety risk to the patient and to anyone else. This has to be replaced. So do it once over. Inspect it. Counterpoise assembly, that's another one. If the injector is hanging from the ceiling, who does the stuff above the ceiling tiles? Normally it's facilities, but maybe it's you. So you want to make sure that is secure. Even before doing the PM, if it's hanging down, loose, whatever, that has to be fixed. That has to be resolved. Do not put yourself in danger if this injector is not safe to work on. Take it down. When I say take it down, do not let anyone use it till those safety issues are resolved. Cabling, like I said, check your cabling issues. This one connects to the head extension cable. How do those connectors look? How does everything look? You haven't torn anything apart yet. You're just doing a visual inspection and bringing it to the attention of the staff there that say, hey, did you know this was like this? Oh, no, when did that happen? Well, I don't know. It's in your department. So bring that to their attention. Now that you've done a visual inspection and nothing is actually broken, you've inspected the covers just visually. You haven't taken anything apart. Everything looks safe to use. Now you want to do a test injection. In my training, I provide a test injection for every injector out there. This is like an operations check. You don't use any water, you just use syringes, and you run it through its courses, its paces. Does this work? Does that work? Does it do the injection? Are there any errors? Because remember, once you start the PM and you find something wrong with it, You broke it because it was working before you started the PM. Remember that. So when you do the operations check and you get an error like intermittent syringe interface, Mary Jane, has this been happening to you? Oh yeah, that happens once in a while, but I just reset it and I just go on. Well, why didn't you let me know about that? Why didn't you call? Well, it just happens every now and then. Well, there's a problem there. Now you can, since you already started the PM, now you can investigate on what could be causing this problem. And with doing that, you may be able to find a broken spring in there or a loose spring causing that intermittent issue. That would be something you would annotate on your PM to come back and correct, because that wasn't seen prior. That's not a visual issue, problem. You can't say, hey, okay, this is broken. So keep that in mind. Run your test injection, whether it be on a Stellant, whether it be on a Provis, a CTA, CVI, it does not matter. Run a test injection. You don't need water. You just need to run it through its paces to make sure you do not get any errors. And if you do get errors, they're probably going to be intermittent errors. That's going to be the trouble with trying to resolve that problem. But maybe you can. Maybe you can. Again, once you start the PM, any issues that are found, you caused. Because you don't want to go back to the customer and say, Mary Jane, I found this while I was doing the PM. Well, it never did that to me. What'd you do to it? Well, we never had that problem. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you're doing the PM and then it doesn't work right after you do the PM. I've been in those shoes and it hasn't been really anybody's fault. It's just the way it is. Something broke while you were doing the PM. Had nothing to do with the PM. It just broke. Could be a connection, a failed connection that you found. But that's good, because you found that problem before it became an issue with patients. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to get a drink of water. Cleaning. Cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. The number one thing you're going to have an issue with is a dirty injector. I don't know why they get so dirty. I have one site in Nashville that I take care of. She apologized because she was on vacation over Thanksgiving and she didn't have time to clean the injector. The injector was spotless. She keeps that injector spotless. And then you get an injector, something like this, and hopefully you can see it. Can you see it on the screen? You see this yellow? That's contrast. That's contrast up inside the plate seal. This has to be taken off and cleaned, which you would normally do on a PM anyways, but that's how dirty this is. It's been there for so long, it's turned yellow. And then we have contrast through the display, in through here, down through here. We have contrast dripping down the back of it. I've seen contrast so thick on injectors, so thick on the floor, I actually had to basically mop the floor so I could stand and do the injector, clean the injector. It was sticky. It's like pouring Coke on there and letting it sit for 20 minutes. Contrast is terrible to clean. Absolutely, I can't stress it enough. For those of you who have worked on injectors and have tried to clean it, there's only one thing that gets contrast off. One thing. And that's hot water. As hot as you can stand it. You don't drench it. You get a nice cotton towel, soak it in hot water, wring it out, and just start cleaning. It breaks down that contrast into a liquid form, but then it's going to solidify back up, and you wipe it down. That's the only thing. There is some contrast cleaners out there, but what I found was it was actually taking the paint off, taking the decals off. I took everything off but contrast. So cleaning is the number one thing. Think about this. you have to have a CT done or an MRI done. And let's stick with the CT. So you go in the room, and it's going to be with and without contrast. So they're going to do the study first without contrast. Then you look over and you see the injector over there, because you're in the healthcare. I don't know about you, but I always look at the equipment in the room when I have procedures done. So it's just natural for us to do it. And you look over there and you see this contrast injector with stalactites and stalagmites of contrast on this thing. You'd want to get up and leave. I mean, if this is the way they treat their equipment, do I need to be having my studies done here, having my procedures done here? I don't know. So if it gets too bad, you may have to talk to the department and start having them be a little bit more careful with the contrast. But yes, contrast is absolutely terrible. It sticks to everything. It's like super glue. And sometimes you have to chisel it out, like on the CVI. There's a drain hole where the syringe goes. That's to catch the contrast as it drips out. There's a little drip pan for it. But believe it or not, we've gotten injectors in here, CVIs in here to work on, and we've actually had to chisel that hole out because it was clogged with contrast. I mean, literally chisel with a hammer and a punch to break through that contrast. It's terrible. So you're going to clean, and you're going to do some more cleaning. And maybe instead of an annual PM, as all these injectors require, maybe it's a quarterly PM, just to keep it clean. Because remember again, the number one issue of causing problems with the injector is contrast. Contrast intrusion. Contrast and saline are conductive. So when it gets on a board, it shorts out the boards. When it dries, it's no longer conductive. But what damage has it caused to that board? They are conductive. Cleaning will take the longest during a PM. I can spend an hour and 15 minutes cleaning the injector. You'll be taking the covers off, like on this Provis. You'll take the covers off. You're going to have contrast up in here, around here, through here. The warmer, you'll have contrast dripping down here on the sides. The overlay here, you can actually see a little bit of it here around. You'll have contrast in here. You may not even be able to take the front cover off because the contrast is so acting like glue. It's just plain terror. I can't stress it enough. A clean injector will run better and be more appeasing to the eye than one covered in contrast. You'll know you have issues when you walk in when you walk into the CT scan room and your feet stick to the floor. You know that's going to be a problem. So again, picture yourself having a CT exam and looking over and seeing this injector just corroded with contrast. I've seen it. I have seen them like that, and I just can't imagine how they do it or why they do that. But even if all you do is just clean the contrast off the injector, they're going to be happy. But that's not the PM. That's most of the PM. Now, the OEM usually does not do that. If it's too bad, they'll come in and say, you need a new injector head. I can't work on it. And you say, well, okay, what does that cost? Well, those of you who had to replace one, it's $12,000 for the injector head. They won't clean. If you're lucky, they may do some cleaning. If you're unlucky, they're going to walk in and say, I can't do a PM on this. And is it covered under their contract? No, because that's misuse of the equipment. You're causing damage to the injector head. So let's talk about lubrication. The Provis is probably one that uses a lot of lubrication, different lubrication points. The Stellant is limited. CVI uses a special lubricant that we offer here in Althea, and it comes with our PM kits, just enough to get you through the PM. Solaris, there is some lubrication, excuse me, there is some lubrication needed on that. But the Provis is a good one because you can see everything. You have worm gears, that uses a light oil. You have your plunger worm gear that uses a heavier grease, and then you have the ram as it comes up that uses a dielectric grease. But verify with the manufacturer reading their service manual, or like Bayer doesn't give you any information on how to do the PM. My training provides you all the information you need to know coming to the training, tearing the injector down completely, putting it all back together, and then doing the PM. But that's all in my training manuals. But this uses the most of the lubrication on the Provis. The cleaning that is required is not so bad on the interventional ones. It's this sucker right here, this stellant. You're gonna hate this one because of the cleaning. All right, so we've gone through the cleaning. You've gone through the lubrication. So let's go ahead and talk about calibration verification. One question I get asked quite a bit, do you have the software to do the calibrations on the Bayer systems? No, I've never needed it. What do you mean? Bayer uses it. Yeah, Bayer does use it, and that's fine. Does Bayer calibrate the unit every time they do a PM? No, they verify that it's within specifications and they move on. CTA, angiomats, assist, and Gerbe injectors actually provide you a way to calibrate those. But with Bayer, they don't give you any information at all. They swear up and down they calibrate the system, but like on an like on a rad room, if 80 kV is 80 kV, do you need to calibrate it? No, you don't. 80 kV is 80 kV. So you need to follow the OEM guidelines. There's multiple levels of calibration and verification. On the Bayers, if it is out of calibration, such as for pressure, okay, what I have found is it's not necessarily the pressure needs to be calibration, it's a mechanical issue. There is something wrong mechanically to throw it out of calibration. So you have to look at the mechanical side. What can be causing it to be out of calibration, or out of specifications, I should say, out of specs? Because once you find the problem and you repair the problem, then you're going to be back in specs. Like I said, is software needed? I've never needed it. I've been doing PMs for over 15 years, and it's never been a problem. If I have been out of specs, I dug a little deeper and said, oh, so the motor's going bad. I replaced the motor, bam, right back into specs again with no problem. So you have some basic verifications that you have to look at. And some of the basic verifications is going to be volume. And the volume is it injecting 50 milliliters when it says 50 milliliters? And is it doing the flow? So you have flow and volume, and that's going to give you the time. So you have 50 milliliters per second into 50 milliliter volume. Of course, your injector is going to be, injection is going to be 10 seconds long. So those are some of the volume is important. Is it injecting what it says is injecting? Flow rate, is a flow what it's supposed to be? Time, is it taking the right amount of time that it's supposed to be? Pressure verification. All these injectors have different specifications for pressure. And there's a set procedure to do that I train in my training class also. We won't get into those only for the fact that it's everyone has different test equipment, and my procedures are based on our contrast injector service kit that can be purchased with training, and it includes everything that you need to do all your verifications and all your checks on all the injectors that you have to service. We have 3 kits. We have the standard that provides all the test equipment for everything but the assist. And then we have the assist service kit, which provides CTA, CVI. And then we have the combination kit, which will include every injector out there. With a few exceptions, like the Empower MR, that's just a rare bird all by itself. and it's hydraulic driven, so we stay away from that. We'll let the OEM handle that. But all the other injectors out there, the service kit that we have put together will handle the injectors that you're going to come across. So pressure verification, that service kit is going to handle that information that you handle any injector to do the test that you need for pressure verification. Additional verifications that may be out there, occlusion, which is very common on the infusion pumps, but less common on contrast injectors. We don't necessarily test that. Certain ones do, certain injectors do, but the majority of them don't. We also have ram and position speeds, how fast the rams go up and go back, different speeds. We time them, make sure they're within specifications, and we do that for several reasons. The biggest one is we're not only timing them, but we're also listening directly to that ram going up and down, so we can hear any clunks, clatters, anything unusual, because we're concentrating on just the ram on A side and B side. Not doing a pressure, say, hey, did I hear that? No, we're concentrating just on the ram itself. So that's what we want to concentrate on. Motor voltage. The Provis checks the motor voltage, making sure that it's within specs of what it's supposed to be, and this one can be adjusted to where it's supposed to be. I think that's the only one that actually has a test for the motor speeds. Motor null voltage, that's another one, just for the Provis. This is an older software, older version. It's not as sophisticated as the newer injectors. It's been around for a long, long time, and you have more checks on this thing. Power supply voltages, we do check those. It's important to have the right voltage. Like on the Stellant, you need a constant 48 volts. If your voltage is fluctuating, it's going to give you problems. So we need to make sure we check out that voltage. DAC voltages, digital to analog or analog to digital voltages. Again, the Provis, older technology, need to check that stuff out. So we have gone through the whole PM. We have cleaned the system. It's looking like new. We've inspected it for any issues that we have. Needs a new head cable. We've gotten all the contrast off. How do you actually clean it? Now that the contrast is off, how do you get the smudges and everything off? I myself, I use straight alcohol, 91% or above. It's a great degreaser when you're doing your gears, to degrease the gears, put new grease on. It doesn't leave any residue. It gets smudges off. I don't go to a PM without alcohol. And if I'm going to a PM site and I forget my alcohol, I'll stop off and buy some alcohol. I just will not do a PM without an alcohol. Cleans up cables nice. It actually makes the whole injector look good. So that's the alcohol. So again, cleaning, contrast, cleaning the outside, replace the gaskets as needed, inspected, inspect, clean, replace as needed. Strongly recommend that they replace them all while you're in there. You're already in there. Why not? Might as well do that. And then we're going to do our verifications. Some have limited verifications, some have more. Always refer to the OEM manuals. But what about Bayer? I don't have any OEM manuals. Bayer tells you to call service. Okay? If you want to know more about doing the PM on any of these injectors, remember, we do offer training classes for just about every injector out there. We have it for, well, tell you what, right there you can email ustraining@althea-group.com with your questions, and I'll be more than happy to respond to them. Like I said, Bayer's the only one that doesn't give you good information. All right, so now we're going to be doing our verifications. We go through our verifications and everything checks out right, we hope. And it normally does. But remember, if it doesn't, it's usually something mechanical. I can't stress that enough. We had a DEPA repair come in, and it was just continued to be overpressure, 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 overpressure. We couldn't get past more than 10 to 15 milliliters on an injection before it was overpressure. It would just spike right up there. And it was mechanical. It was mechanical. It was a bad motor. The motor was drawing too much amperage, and the computer, the CPU board said, oh, whoa, whoa, something's wrong, overpressure, overpressure. And we fixed that with just a motor. And it fell right into the specs that we needed. If it doesn't meet specifications, mechanical. Don't necessarily have to call in bare. It's mechanical. Final operations check, very important. You want to do your final operations check. You never want to leave a site without doing a final operations check. On the Provis, you have to change the settings to a milliliter per minute. Not milliliter per second, but milliliter per minute. If you do not change it back, your first phone call in the morning is going to be, didn't you do a PM here last night? Yes, I did. Well, my injector's working, but it's running awfully slow, very slow. Well, you didn't change it back to milliliters per second. Enter the original protocols. Put it the way you found it, original protocols. Update the customer on the PM procedure. Did everything go well? Did it pass PM? Were there any issues found? And thank you for allowing you to work on their equipment. But that's pretty much covers basic contrast injector PM procedures. Talk with the talk with the customer, record the protocol, initial inspection, test injection, cleaning, 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 calibration verification, final operations check, enter the original protocol, and update the customer. Always update the customer, even if you leave a note on the injector saying, I was here last night, completed PM on injector, everything went well, call me if you have any issues. Some directors want you to call them. Doesn't matter what time you get done, send me an email or call me or text me. Okay, not a problem. Whatever the customer wants. So that's pretty much it. Very simple procedures. You have to get your OEM specifications for each injector. PM kits, strongly, highly recommend you use PM kits. What's the sense of changing oil if you're not going to change the oil filter? Think about that, okay? Cleaning, a clean injector definitely runs better and has fewer issues with it throughout the year. And keep the customer informed of how things went. So at this point, one last thing again, Althea, 888-652-5974, and email us at us.training@althea-group.com, and I'll respond to your phone calls and your email. So this pretty much concludes my presentation of basic PM procedures for contrast injectors, and I'd like to open up to any questions. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gossman. Now we will open it up for some live Q&A. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Gossman about the criteria covered today, or any other questions regarding the Althea Contrast Injector Training class, please reply to the host now. We will wait a few minutes. Okay, our first question. It sounds like all injector PM procedures are the same. Why do I need to go through training?
Well, you're absolutely right. PM procedures are basically the same. Training, I mentioned in the presentation that PMs normally take 2 hours to do. But what about the other 365 days? Doing a PM is fine, but understanding why you're doing the PM, why you're doing the procedures that you're doing, and if something doesn't go right, how to resolve it while you're doing the PM. Also, our Althea training provides you basic information of how does the operator operate the injector? What's the purpose and how is this the injector is operated? Troubleshooting, parts replacement, and then the PM. So our training not only provides how to do the PM, that's actually a small part. It's more in disassembling the unit, understanding how the unit works, understanding how all the boards intertwine with each other, communication. I concentrate on 3 circuits: power circuit, communication circuit, and motor drive circuit. Those are your 3 main circuits in any injector. And my training concentrates on just that, how to troubleshoot them and how to repair them.
Okay, we have another question. How are aftermarket PM kits different than OEM PM kits?
Well, aftermarket PM kits, I think, at least with Althea's, we design these to be more productive, more useful to the technician doing the PM. As I demonstrated earlier with the Bear kit, it doesn't give you the gaskets that you may need. It gives you basically 1 gasket to do overlay assembly, and yes, that's an important gasket. But if you once you take the covers off, you find you have more damaged gaskets. What are you're going to have to stop the PM and order the gaskets. And would you put the covers back on with damaged gaskets? It's like you're just asking for problems. So with the Althea PM kit, we give you the gaskets that you're going to need to replace, and they're there while you're inside the injector. OEM doesn't seem to think that way. I think they just want to, well, I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to answer that question. I do know why I designed that PM kit the way it is so that you have the gaskets you need to do a proper PM.
Okay. Another question, how far do I need to break down the injector to clean it?
Good question. How far do you need to tear it down? Well, there's certain calibrations on the stellant that you're able to do, and you have to take the covers off. So once you take the covers off, you're going to see how bad the contrast is. This is the top end assembly. And once you take the covers off, if you inspect your optic sensors, if you see contrast in there, you may have to take the top end off and clean it. So it's going to be your judgment call of how far you want to tear it down. And going back to my early days in biomed back in 1992, always repair equipment as if you're the next patient on that table. And that has happened to me. I was the next patient on that table. So I always try to do the best I can do, and always better than what I can do.
Okay, next question. Do you need special software to do a PM on the injector?
The OEM will tell you yes. But in my 15 years of working on injectors, I have never needed it. Problems I have found have been mechanical. Now, you can't get away from software issues, but that's not doing the PM. Those are repairs. And a lot of times you don't need that special software. Bayer is the only one that kind of blocks everybody out of everything. And the other manufacturers will have information on how to do things, even how to get into the service keys and such, but Bayer does not provide any of that. Bayer states that they do a calibration on every PM. Like I mentioned earlier, they verify. Why calibrate it when it's in specs? So my answer is no, you do not need special software to do the PM.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. What all is included in your injector training class, and do you train on assist?
What's included? The training concentrates on the technician's point of view. The course was developed as a technician would see this injector. And what I mean by that is, and I mentioned it earlier, what do these buttons do? What do these buttons do? What does autofill do? What do these two plus and minuses buttons do? The training provides you the information of understanding how to use this injector. On all the training courses for all the injectors are set up that way. Before we get into even doing PMs, you go through the first section of the book, of the training manual, and tells you what everything does and how it does it. I said earlier, concentrate on the three main circuits: the communication circuit, the power circuit, and the motor drive circuit. Those are the three main circuits you're going to be working on. You're going to get I go over contrast injector theory. What is pressure? How is pressure created? What is pressure for? And how does pressure apply to a contrast injector? Why do we need so much pressure? We get into all of that. As far as training on different models, I cover bare models, I cover the CTA, CVI, assist models, and I also cover the Gerbe models, injectors. I think there's 12 injectors I train on. And when let's just say the CTI, the CTA injector, there's the old version and the new version. If you come to my training, or Althea's training, you will see both versions. Not you have to pay for one and then you have to pay for another. If it's CTA training, you will get trained on both injectors, not just one. Same with the Provis. We have the pedestal, the rack mount, the Stellant. We have the Legacy Stellant. We have the Certegra Workstation Stellant. And now we're beginning a program with the Stellant Flex injector and seeing the difference on that one. So you'll get to see all three injectors, not just Legacy Stellant or Certegra Workstation. You will see all of them. CVI is the CVI injector. So any questions, any models that you may have and you want to, write to us, email us, and ask if we cover these injectors, be more than happy to respond to you. But there's only a very few that we do not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gossman. If we did not get to your question, we will respond back to you following the webinar. Should you need to reach out after the webinar, our contact information is on the board. Again, thank you for attending our webinar Wednesday.